Hey everyone, this is Brian Ferguson. Fans of the AWA, you are in for a real treat. My friend Joyce Poston has just released her book titled My Ringside Seat to the AWA. Joyce writes about her personal experiences with wrestlers such as Nick Bockwinkel, Lord Alfred Hayes, Baron Von Raschke, and others. Joyce also has published many photos from her collection that you will not see anywhere else. Order today by email at joyce.poston@gmail.com. Payment is through PayPal. The book is only $20 plus $6 shipping and handling. International orders, please email Joyce for shipping charge. Folks, run, don't walk to your keyboard, and order today. And enjoy the podcast. Thank you for joining another edition of Bumps and Thumps, the Talk of Wrestling. I'm Brian Ferguson. My guest today is one of the hottest indie guys that's come around in a while, in my opinion. He wrestles, I've seen him at Mid-States Wrestling. He does New Breed Wrestling and other indies around in Missouri and Arkansas. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce handsome Scott Hansen. Scott, how are you?
I'm doing well. The handsome one is hyped to be on Bumps and Thumps. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming on. I know you're a busy guy. You got other things going on. I appreciate you taking the time. So
hey, it's important. It's important.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk a little bit. Kind of go back a little bit if we can. Are you from Missouri?
Yes, I'm from St. Joseph, up north of Kansas City.
Okay, up north. Okay. So if we could, Scott, or Handsome, however you want to be called.
whichever you would like.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about growing up in St. Joe, your childhood. Tell us a little bit about your background, if you would, please.
For sure. So growing up, had two brothers, or have two brothers. They're both still alive. I'm the middle child. Growing up, I was just having an older brother really influenced me a lot. So I was just always into sports from the word go. And any ball I could get my hands on, loved NASCAR, anything with a motor, anything with wheels, any types of, ball sport, anything really active that I could do. I was just always into that. So, growing up, played a lot of sports, had a really active lifestyle. Wasn't really a wrestling fan as a kid, actually. I can remember like 06, 07. I remember just flipping through the channels. I was probably 8, 9 years old. And I still remember it vividly because I was like, what is this? And it was SmackDown, and it was Undertaker and Mr. Kennedy in their feud. And I believe it was around the time of their casket match. Or it wasn't a casket match. It was a hearse match or something. And it was just, the whole set was so elaborate. And I remember seeing that, and I'm like, this is something, but I can't quite figure out what this is. I didn't know if it was like reality TV or, I knew there was some sporting element. But I really didn't think much of it. It didn't draw me in to become a fan quite yet. So I was just really active in sports. And then, when I think it was 5th grade, one of my now close lifelong friends transferred schools to my elementary school, and eventually he got me on the topic of pro wrestling. And I was like, hey, I'm open to it. And I believe this was around the fall of 09. So John Cena was really hot. Raw was on Monday Night USA. And I remember one time just sat down and watched it, and I was in. I don't know what it was.
Wow.
But just I think the athletics of it, just seeing that mixed with sort of the more theatrical elements. I've been huge into movies, love television, stuff like that. But I guess just the fusion of the two really hooked me. So I was always I was kind of a closet fan. Being
I'm with you.
being super into sports, in real sports. My dad is actually a high school collegiate wrestler. Way back in the day, when Northwest Missouri State had a wrestling program, he wrestled there. So it was always a tough sell getting him to watch wrestling with me. But he was supportive enough. When I think I was in 6th grade. He took me to my first wrestling show. I saw SmackDown in Des Moines, Iowa.
Okay.
Couple-hour car ride. I remember we got seats like right behind. It was Michael Cole and Booker T at the time, and I had the time of my life. And I just looking back now, I imagine my dad was like, "Man, I'll get him to this, and then eventually one day he'll be done." And I know this is a passing fad, and I brought that up to him a while back actually, and he was like, "No, I didn't think you'd still be doing this. I thought by age 12 or 13 you'd be calling it stupid."
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I was really into it. And then once I got more into high school, I played football, basketball, track, high school, and I would keep up with pro wrestling,
Mhm.
online. I remember I would just check like WWE.com every once in a while to see
Okay.
who the champions were. Uh, I was a big TNA guy as a kid as well. I was a huge Jeff Hardy
Yeah.
fan, kind of the
Yeah.
guy that got me super into wrestling. So once he moved to TNA, I was like all TNA.
Yeah.
Uh, but I just kind of I stopped watching. I was just casually keeping up with it. Uh, and so I eventually I was good enough at football. I got lucky to play at Central Methodist University,
Hmm.
Fayette, Missouri, NAIA school. Got lucky enough to get a scholarship offer there. So from 15 to 22, it was really just it was all football. That was my life.
Yeah.
Uh, but I always kind of in my back pocket, I was like, man, like I'd really like to try wrestling. Would really like to try wrestling. And then once I graduated college, thought, well, now's the time.
Wrestling fans, promoters, wrestlers, and anyone who enjoys pro wrestling now have something new to be excited about. The Wrestling Fans International Association, the WFIA, is back. WFIA is an association that exists to promote, grow, and support professional wrestling throughout the world. Membership is free. Your membership includes a free digital bi-monthly publication of the Wrestling Fan News newsletter, association updates, voting privileges, and much more. Please go to thewfia.org, that's THEWFIA.org, and become a member today. Wow. That's I was going looking at your Facebook page, some of your photos and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
you were, very good athlete. I mean, even you were very, I could tell, in shape physically.
Thank
You
you,
still
thank you.
are. I mean, for high school though, I mean, you
Hey,
were, you had all the, the muscles kind of. You had
yeah.
the,
Burt Cameron says I'm built like an action figure.
yeah. Well, he's right, and
Oh,
and I remember. I'm gonna skip forward a little bit, then I'm gonna go back. But I remember seeing you first time at Mid States. It was probably maybe it was a year or two. I can't remember exactly when, but I remember you coming out and you were a heel, and but I just looked and you just had that charisma, if you will.
okay,
And you had that charisma, and you had you would say the right things to the right people when you were walking in up to the ring. You know how people are booing you or saying some
for sure.
sarcastic remarks, and
Derogatory,
yeah, derogatory, and you always had when I was paying attention, you always had the appropriate return remark or whatever, and your in-ring ability. I can't remember who you wrestled now at the time, but uh, I just thought, man, this guy, you've got something. And I'm not just saying that because you're on here. I've said that to some other people. Your promoter, Jason Jones. I mean, but let's not. I'm going to circle back a little bit. I want to
uh,
say, go ahead.
no, I was agreeing with
Okay,
you. What do you got?
I was going to say. Circling back now to when you were getting in, where were you trained, and how was that training for you? Was it what you expected, or not even close, or maybe, or talk about that a little bit if you would, Scott.
So it's actually it's a kind of a wild story. So while I was in school, on the weekends and during summers when I was home in St. Joe from Central Methodist, I worked at Planet Fitness in St. Joe. And the assistant general manager there at the time, I knew from growing up from around St. Joe, and I knew he was a pretty big wrestling fan. So we'd kick it at work sometimes, and I
Mm-hmm.
remember him telling me because we both shared the love of wrestling, and he goes, "Hey, there's a pro wrestler that comes in here," and I'm like, "No, man, like St. Joe, like there's no like that doesn't really happen." But he's like, "No, man, for real, like, and I think this guy does training." So once I graduated and I was done with football, I was like, okay, like I'm going to see what this is really about. So got in contact with Niles Planquet, the great Niles, Mr. Craig,
Yep.
and there was a few months before I actually started training him, or before he actually started training me, that I was just in contact with him, trying to figure out, get more information, see what it was about, see where he was at. Luckily, like 20 minutes north of my house. And
Okay.
so I started training, I believe it was the end of May of 2022.
Oh gosh.
So I was still in college trying to finish my degree. I was done playing football, but I still had a semester left. And man, like just the thoughts that were going through my head, I was like, man, I really don't know what to expect. And as a kid, I tried to be like a smart fan as a kid.
Yeah.
I was into the internet and reading all that stuff. And so I would always want to get like the backstories and the behind the scenes stuff and learn as much about that. So knowing what I knew, about how guys back in the, 70s, 80s, 90s used to get broke in, I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this might be pretty tough. Going through collegiate strength and conditioning programs, and just that sort of conditioning. I knew from an athletic standpoint that I could make it, but it was the mental part. I'm like, okay, like, how much BS is there going to be? Is there going to be crazy politics just in training? But after my first day, I was hooked. Craig is seriously like the most wonderful coach. And it's funny because I call him coach. I call him coach sometimes, just because rather like trainer, rather just from my sporting background. I'm like, man, like you
Mm-hmm.
were legitimately a coach. Like the way that he is not only physically with us, but just like mentally getting to relate to every trainee in a different
Mm-hmm.
way. Like he can find what motivates everybody, and he talks to everyone a different way. He can cater to how they are, and he caters to their
Mm-hmm.
skill. And I was hooked. He treated me with respect the first time. uh and I was like, okay, I have to do this. I have to keep doing
Yeah.
this. And so it was a blast. I first got there, and the class he had in there uh was Rex Amadeus. Rex was in there. uh who else was it? Dread Roberts. Dread
Okay.
Roberts was there. Bert actually started. It's crazy because Bert actually started like a month after I did, and
Mm-hmm.
he had his first match like 2 months after he'd been training or something wild like that. Where
Yeah.
uh, I felt like naturally, okay, like I have a pretty good grasp on this, but it took me a while to get the confidence to be like, okay, I'm ready to do this, publicly. I'm ready to bare my soul, and I feel confident enough in the moves that I'm doing that I could play a
Mm-hmm.
character while doing this. So,
Mm-hmm.
went through all the summer training, and Bert started to wrestle, and I'm like, man, like this guy's picking it up quick. And in my head, I was like, okay, like he's picking it up quick. Like I started to get the confidence where I'm like, okay, maybe I could do this. And Craig was kind of starting to agree. He's like, hey man, like there comes a point where you're only going to be so ready. And he told me like, hey, I can only teach you so much. A lot of it you're just going to have
Yeah.
to learn out there.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. This is Brian Ferguson, the host of Bumps and Thumps, the talk of wrestling. I want to tell you about a new podcast out called Fouls Count Anywhere. It is a classic pro wrestling podcast that brings you the legends of wrestling with true wrestling fans Chris DiCarlo and Charlie Turner. They bring on guests that are legends in this business, and as well as wrestlers of today, promoters, referees, you name it. They have them on there, folks. And I encourage you to listen to them. If you're on YouTube, watch them. They drop every Saturday. They have their podcast. They drop it in the afternoon. So look forward to that podcast coming out. Falls Count Anywhere podcast with Chris DiCarlo and Charlie Turner. Folks, you will not be disappointed. I guarantee it. And enjoy the podcast.
Which he was totally right. I mean, spot on, hit
Yeah.
the nail on the head. And it was end of August. He wrangled up a lot of us, and we went out to Rocky Mountain Pro in
Okay.
the Denver area. And I've only been training for like 3 months, just green as grass. And at the end of the second day of TV tapings, it was me, Ernie Elwood, and then the guy who was actually my general manager at Planet Fitness. He's trained with Craig on and off for a little while. So we were all up there, and we got the chance, us three, to be in a gauntlet match. And it was about 2 minutes of action between 2 different gauntlet matches. And boy, it was a blur. It was a blur. And like, I almost don't even want to count it as my first match because it was a gauntlet type situation. And I really just, like, I remember running out there because it was a quick pace sort of thing. And I remember not even having like thoughts process in my head. I was just like, okay, go out there, do this, and whatever you do, don't mess up. Yeah. So that was my first real experience in wrestling. But I don't know how I feel about counting that as my first match, just because I don't feel like Scott Hansen wasn't born yet. That was just that was sort of a feeling out process.
Yeah.
So last fall, just kept training, kept plugging away, and I'm like, man, I want to be super super good at this. Before I even go out, like I want to be fully confident. So that eventually led to this past February, where Craig informed us. He's like, hey, JJ at Mid States, he's getting some television tapings going in February at the fairgrounds, and he's like, hey, are you in? And I'm like, man, Harrison's 5 hours away from me, but I was like, you know what, like, why not dive in? And so glad I did. So glad I did. Yeah. So it was the first match that you saw me actually. It was that was my first like real match.
Okay.
Early February, and I wrestled Burt Cameron. I got to wrestle Burt, so that was a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, I now that you said that, that's it. I gotta ask you,
for sure,
Scott, where did you come up with the fur coat? Your gimmick, I guess. Where did you come up with this? I gotta know.
For a while, man, I was like, I have no idea what my gimmick could be. Like, I remember when I was in training, it was right when Hook in AEW started to get popular, and I was enamored with him. Like, it was like one of these things where I'm pretty cynical now when it comes to wrestling. I hate to say, but just seeing that, I was like, oh, like I like this, and just like the MMA Muay Thai shorts. He's got custom Nike Air Force Ones that are like high topped into wrestling boots, and just the whole appearance and appeal and the mystique of it. I was like, okay, like, I could go for the badass sort of fighter thing, but it felt like I was just kind of blatantly ripping something off and it would be inauthentic. And I was like, man, I got to come up with something a little more spicy, a little more original. Yeah. And I'm not gonna, I don't remember who, so I'm not gonna pinpoint one person, but it was either Rex or it was Burt, who one night in training was just like handsome Scott Hansen. And I was like, oh, okay, you might be onto something. And thought about it. And one of Craig's trainer was Harley Race, handsome Harley Race.
Yes.
And so I was like, okay, that would be kind of a cool tribute. I'd be paying homage to obviously one of the greats and kind of like the lineage of my training. So kind of a nod there. And I'm like, okay, handsome Scott Hansen. And I started getting ideas. And I remembered, so the leopard print fur coat, I am not joking. I bought like 4 years ago before I even had wrestling on my mind. And I would literally wear that during the winter. Like going around when I was at Central Methodist, I would wear that to classes. I was on one. I would wear that normally.
That's great.
So I had back at that time I had super long hair. I had bleached tips in my hair, and I would wear a leopard print fur coat around. So you guess I guess I was living my gimmick unbeknownst to myself before I even got into wrestling.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I want to say I've heard nothing but great things about Craig. Craig Niles Ponquet, if you will.
There you go.
Uh,
Okay.
everybody that I've had on here that has worked in mid states or associated that's trained with Craig has always said exactly pretty much what you said. He gives you the fundamentals. He treats you with respect. He talks to you like a person. You know, he understands. I want to say really I guess the psychology of what a wrestler has to go through to get from starting their training to getting into their first match. And obviously, you guys, all you guys that are at mid states I've seen that have just upstarted. I thought you'd been in longer than just over a little over a year. I mean, that's the truth. And so that says something about you, and it says something about the training that Craig and his staff do. So, but I see so much in you guys, and I'm just so glad that it doesn't cost a person an arm and a leg to go see you guys uh, put on a card. And I want to talk about that. So, you've been wrestling for about a year. You said you've been up in Denver, Arkansas, Springfield area, Sedalia, all those areas. Is one of your favorites spots to work? I don't want to say favorite because I don't want to get you in trouble. But what's one of your favorite areas probably to work in for you? Crowd wise, whatever. What is it for you, Scott?
So far, I've wrestled in Missouri, Arkansas, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, Minnesota, and then I had the Colorado, and then I've also been in Illinois.
Okay.
Uh, but honestly, like so far, I'd say one of the favorites so far has got to be Harrison. It's
Yeah.
just it's the crowd. It's the super old
Yeah.
school crowd.
Yeah.
You walk into the fairgrounds building and it's got that like smoky atmosphere, and you feel like you're in like the 1960s. And they're good old folks, and
Yeah.
they're hardworking, blue collar people. And when they see someone come in with a leopard coat and a comb over, who's smirking at them, there's a visceral reaction. I get that a lot in Springfield, a lot of rural communities. I wrestled in Beatrice, Nebraska back in March for MWA with Brian Blade, and
Okay.
it was a small show at the City Auditorium. There's probably 100 people there, but whoa, what a crowd! And it's when
Yeah.
you think of like, okay, these people see wrestling maybe once a year, and you don't have to set the world on fire and do a dragon rana from the top rope to get these people to react.
Yeah.
If anything, they're reacting more to to the character aspect of it. And so
Hmm.
just getting the more, especially for my gimmick while working heel, getting
Yeah.
the more blue collar, hardworking older folks, the down home country folk, they really react, and
Yeah.
I just feed off of it. I feed off of it.
Yeah. I tell you, one of my favorite fans down there is that Grandma Hulkster in Harrison. She is, she is a
Yeah,
hoot. I tell you. I know
yeah.
she's been going through some issues lately with her husband's medical, but I mean, she is such a hoot, and just she's
It's like
funny. I love her.
some of these people who are in the crowd, like you would almost think if as an outsider, someone just going to that show, you're like, are like they've got to be part of it. Like they've got to be in on it.
Yeah, yeah,
Like some
they've
of these
got to be
people
fun.
are
Yeah,
seriously just big characters in real life as
yeah,
some of the rest are. It's
yeah.
astounding. I
Oh,
love it.
yeah. No, it's great. No, I think it's great down there. I love the Springfield crowd. I mean, I live in Springfield, but every time I go to a show here or in Harrison, one, it's sold out, and two is the crowd is always good and into it. They love their wrestling. They love that mid states. Jason Jones. Let's talk about the hardest working man in
He really
wrestling.
is. He earned that nickname. He's earned
Yeah.
that man.
Tell me about your experiences with him. Like, were you a little nervous the first time you interacted with him? Because he's a well known
Oh,
uh, promoter.
I was. So I was actually out of all of our training group, I was like the last one really to start working. And I'd heard all these stories about JJ, and they're like, man, like, he's you got to get on his good side, and it's not the easiest thing to get on his good side. And I'm like, man, like I really hope I make a good impression. So the February TV tapings, I went down the first week, drove myself 5 hours, and I didn't have any bookings. JJ was like, "Hey, buddy, just come show up. I don't have anything for you, but if something happens, you never know what'll happen. Someone can no show, injuries. He's like, hey, just bring your gear, and don't have anything for you, but you never know." So I went down there, and I remember thinking on the car ride down, I was like, okay, just shut up and listen. Don't talk unless you're spoken to, and smile at everybody and just shut up, listen. So went down the first week and didn't have any work for me, but I believe he had me run in and separate a brawl. And in preparation for that, I got all my gear on, and with no shirt, in my ring ready condition.
Yeah.
I don't know if he noticed or what, but at the end of the night, he goes, "Hey, got you a spot next week, got you a match." And I was like, "Man, like, awesome." And then 10, 20 minutes later, I figure out, oh, I'm wrestling Burt Cameron. So I'm like, okay, like, I appreciate, I don't know if it was him that did it or what, but I was like, okay, they threw me a bone, gave me a match with someone I'm familiar with. So that gave me a lot of confidence. But still, all those February TV tapings, I'm like, just do whatever he tells you.
Yeah.
Don't say too much. But I remember the match with Burt, my debut. I had the coat and everything, and I'm backstage, and he goes, "Hey man, you got a mirror or a comb?" He's like, "You really need to come out and just milk the whole thing." So the mirror and the comb, that's JJ's idea, and I was like, "Man, what a killer idea!" Like, he struck gold
Yeah.
with that, because it just amplifies it all, and the people eat that up
Oh
way.
yeah.
It just takes the thing to a whole nother level.
Yeah.
And so just throughout the year, I let JJ know, I'm like, hey, I really appreciate the opportunity, and I really love what Mid States is all about. I love the talent here. I love the presentation. I can see all the hard work you put into it. Like, whenever you want me on anything, I will be there for you.
Mhm.
And it seems like each and every show, not consistently going up, but I have some sort of responsibility each show.
Mhm.
And I've started to get to the point now where, I think he has a certain level of trust in me.
Mhm.
And the October 7th show in Harrison, I was going down there and I had no clue what I was doing.
Mhm.
And I kind of like that, though. Keeps me on my toes. Uh, but, probably a half hour there, he goes, "Hey, you're in the main tonight. Four-way ladder match for the Southern title." And, I'm like,
Oh.
huh? I've
Yeah.
gone from, wrestling the headsman in a 4-minute match a couple
Yeah.
months ago, to now being in the main. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, you're getting something thrown at you, you know make chicken salad out of chicken, shit. So so I it was a blast. I hate to say it's my favorite match so far, but honestly, like, it felt like a lot of the stuff that I've been learning, and a lot of the time I've been taking is starting to chip away at being paid off. And I feel like
Yeah.
he's started to instill a certain level of trust in me. And man, I
Mhm.
love the guy. He's a gem. He's a
Yeah.
gem.
I've known Jason for just a couple of years, but I really got to know him actually not this past trip to Vegas, the year before,
Mhm.
and he is such a good guy. Has so much knowledge, and he knows so many people.
Yeah, that guy's.
He knows he's the like in the who's who, and it's great. And I know it's because he works hard. Like I know he demands a lot of you guys too, but I know he works hard. But he puts on a great card, and you guys are such a big part of that. And good for you that you're in the main event. And I'm excited about November 11th here in a few weeks here in Springfield. Um, it looks like a card, a who's who on the card. Yourself.
It's yeah,
So you,
it's gonna be a bang up show.
yeah, and I'm looking forward to it. But I want to talk a little bit about. I'm going to circle back a little bit more now. Since you have started wrestling, who has been an opponent or a tag team partner that you've just gelled with that is just like it's not really work, it's just it's just you guys flow well, you guys have that chemistry, you kind of know what you either is going to do before they do it, something like that. Scott, who is a person or persons that click with you?
So actually, there's a few, but I would say most of all so far, probably Dread Roberts. It'd be Dread. Him and I, he's like 6'4", 6'5", like he's a big dude. And I'm,
He's a big
I'm
guy.
only I'm around 6 foot 5'11", hovering there. But him and I, we both have a pretty athletic style. And I remember seeing him do stuff in training, and I'm like, okay, if he can do it, I think I can. And first time we wrestled was it was at one of the winery shows that Niles puts on, and
Hmm.
we didn't talk it out before. We talked the finish out,
Yeah.
but we really just kind of went out there, said, hey, let's do what we do what we've been trained to
Yeah.
do what we know. And
Yeah.
boy, like without hardly any effort, we put on. I hate to call it one of my favorite matches because it was just an exhibition. But without any effort at all, we put together some great stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, and then recently in New Breed at Macon Mayhem, there was a tag match, him and Luke Langley and Bert and I.
Hmm.
And working with Dredd is just easy. He's a big guy that can move well. He sells
Yeah.
great for you. All of
He
his
does.
stuff is crisp, and so it's easy. It's easy to sell back. And he's just a guy. He's a smart, intelligent guy, and he
Yeah.
knows psychology wise because he's got that Craig training, which
Yeah.
you know there were so many little things that I really never thought about that I would have to know about pro wrestling. And
Hmm.
just going to training with Craig every night, I'm like, man, like I remember I would have nights where I was like, am I going to be able to handle all this?
Yeah.
But just with experience working with great people, I would say Dread. And then one of the other guys that I would say is pretty easy to work with, going back to that tag match, is Luke Langley.
Yeah.
So all I've had to work with Luke so far is that tag match. But him and I were in the ring together for a lot of that. And I've actually he does some training in Kansas City with
Hmm.
some of the KC guys, the Premier, Scott Tyler, Mo Green. But
Hmm.
he started doing training stuff there, and I'm like, man, like it's a Wednesday night. I'm 45 minutes away. There were times when Craig wouldn't have training, so I'm like, you know what? I'll go down there. And Luke's another one of those guys where he's just like Craig. He's a wealth of knowledge. He can
Yeah.
talk to anybody, and
Yeah.
he makes these things easy. And I've trained there with him a few times, and just getting to know his style more and getting to know how he works a match. That tag match with him, it was like butter. It was like butter, and
Yeah.
he made me look a lot better than I probably really am. And I just, more power to him. He's a
Yeah.
ring general. He's a ring general.
Did you ever wonder what could have been with the AWA had things gone differently? Had their fortunes gone differently? Had certain wrestlers not left and perhaps more money would have been at the disposal of the Ganyas? Well, wonder no further. You can go to Brad Drake's YouTube channel and experience the 1987 Supermod for yourself, as Brad Drake starts off in May 1987 along with Greg Gagne, Baron von Raschke, Vern Gagne himself, Nick Bockwinkel, Larry Zabisco, Kurt Hennig, and a slew of others as he plays and saves the AWA.
Yeah. I really enjoy Luke's work when he's in the ring. I had a podcast with him a while back, and just so well spoken too, as a
Oh,
uh,
very very eloquent, very eloquent.
very
That guy,
eloquent, very well spoken. Yeah, and he's just a wealth of knowledge and a great guy too. So
for sure. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, I want to ask you about how about your family? I mean, I know you about your dad, but you have a girlfriend. what does she think of all this? What you're doing now, as far as, is she good with it, or is she just do what you
So
got to do?
so before we started, actually dating, we've been talking, and I told her, I was like, I really like pro wrestling, and when we first started dating, I was still playing football, uh, and I told her, I was like, hey, I'm really focused on this football stuff. Uh, you know, Obviously, I'm gonna do what it takes to commit myself to that.
Mhm.
If you're not okay with it, that's fine. We won't have to go any further. But she's just been a saint through everything. Uh,
Yeah.
she'd like never seen wrestling at all, had zero frame of reference of it. And she was like, hey, like I remember we were sitting down one day on the couch, and she's like, will you show me like wrestling? She's like, I really have no idea what it is. And my go-to match that I always show people who haven't seen pro wrestling is Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, Halloween Havoc, 1997. And it's fast
Yeah.
paced, hard hitting,
Yeah.
and character wise, you have the super, Eddie was jacked at that point, super
Hmm.
cocky baby face, and then you have this tiny guy in a crazy mask who's just working from underneath, better than almost anyone in the history of pro wrestling has worked at from underneath. And it told a good story. She's like, okay, I'm hooked. Like that was really cool.
Yeah.
And so she's been super supportive through all of it. Like
Yeah.
she's from Branson.
Okay.
So her family still lives in Branson. So anytime I have a Springfield show for Mid States or a Harrison show for Mid States, she's always there. Her family
Good.
comes,
Yeah.
rallies around it. Uh, my dad has actually kind of become like my biggest fan in a way,
Okay. That's
but
good.
he's always been super supportive of me. Like
Yeah.
growing up together, he was always super into football and track when I was running it, and just always been my biggest fan. And I think once he started seeing the work that I was putting into pro wrestling,
Yeah.
uh, he started to realize like, okay, he's serious about it. And, I would tell him the things that we were learning, and, we'd watch matches together, and I would point certain things out to him. And,
Yeah.
we have nights now where we'll be sitting, in his garage watching YouTube on the big TV, just old
Yeah.
matches. And we'll
Yeah.
be watching that for hours, just sitting back analyzing it. And so he's
Yeah.
really become like my biggest fan in a way, which is really cool to see. Both my brothers are super stoked that I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Uh, my older brother hasn't been to a show yet, uh, but he's really into it. We watched Dark Side of the Ring together, and he likes the
Okay.
more behind the scenes aspect of it, and just
Yeah.
the character associated with it. Like him and I are big Jim Cornette fans. Just through
Okay.
Dark Side of the Ring,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
saw the
Yeah.
personality, and I'm like, yeah, like this guy's serious about wrestling. Like,
Yeah.
he's about it. He's a lifer.
Yeah.
So can't wait to get him to a show. And I everyone's just been super supportive. I haven't had any pushback, and I can't be thankful enough for all my family and friends.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. You talk about being a closet fan. When I was a kid, I was a closet fan. Had to be. This was in the '80s,
Yeah,
and until Hogan came around, and then all of a sudden it was cool,
yeah, exactly.
and then yeah, and then you're like, oh, and then I could, yeah, I'm a wrestling fan, and so I understand that, but you guys are doing great. I am so looking forward to this show here coming up in a couple weeks. I already got my tickets because I know every
There you
time,
go.
every time if I don't, I've had tickets, but I see people lined up there at that Relic
Yeah,
Center, and you can't get in if they don't have a ticket, and
exactly.
that says something right there.
Man,
Couple
honestly,
more. Go ahead.
it's JJ. He's he really is the hardest working man, and he's one of those guys where you see all the work he puts in, and
Mhm.
it goes back on you. It inspires you, and you're like, man, like if he's working that hard, like I really need to step my game up as well. And just
Yeah,
seeing all the blood, sweat, and tears that he puts into it, literally,
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
it inspires you, and it makes you think like, okay, this guy's on this level. I want to get on that level someday. So I
yeah,
mean, he's seriously he's the best, and all the work that he's put in is paying off, and it's what that's why Mid States is
yeah,
sold out every show.
yeah. No doubt in my mind. One more question. Actually, two. One is, if people want to follow you or reach out to you on social media, Facebook, Twitter?
For
What do
sure.
you got?
I would say I use Facebook and Instagram the most. My
Okay.
Facebook is just Scott Hansen. Uh,
Okay.
my Instagram is at the Scott Hansen.
The E.
TheScottHansen. So the
Okay.
Scott.
The.
And I do have Twitter. It's at Scott Hansen 33. So
Okay.
it's kind of a bizarre. My Twitter situation is kind of bizarre because I also coach high school football, and
Okay.
uh, high school football players are super active on Twitter. And my Twitter has kind of become like a page for like coaching and pro wrestling. So it's
Gotcha.
it's a really odd dichotomy of like what I'm seeing on Twitter and the people who are
Yeah.
following me. And this past summer, all the football players found out that I'm a pro wrestler. And so they're constantly always, are giving me banter about that. And they know now, and they're like, man, like we got to come see you at a show. And,
Yeah.
hopefully I get a few wrestling fans out of it. Hopefully they start
Yeah.
realizing that wrestling is actually pretty cool. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's my social media situation.
All right. I'm going to put that in the description
For sure. Thank you.
underneath. Yeah, of course. And one more question. Merchandise. You sell stuff at the shows?
Correct.
T-shirts? Yeah. Okay.
Correct. So far, I have one T-shirt out. I have the
I like it.
one, and then on the back it's got the Hansen.
I
So
like it.
these are the T-shirts I currently have for sale. Thinking about getting new ones. So far, I'm in the process of getting like 8x10 glossy photos. I'm getting that worked
Yes.
on. And
Okay.
right now it's just the shirts, which I was really happy with that design.
Yeah, that's
And
cool. I like it.
of them, and just kind of going, back to my sports background. I've always been obsessed with sports, and getting to intertwine that with wrestling merchandise. I went for the the
Yeah.
jersey, and
Yeah.
I think they're cool, but
Oh yeah.
what does that mean at the end of the day? Yeah, I sell shirts at all my shows.
Yeah.
Got sizes left, so yeah, anybody who wants to buy one of those. I'm not on Pro Wrestling Tees yet. I want to be, and I will be eventually. But one of
Yeah.
the things one of the other things I've found out since I started working is like,
Mhm.
man, one of the other parts of it is merchandise. It takes so
Yeah.
much effort and a lot of work and a lot of thinking. So
Mhm.
I'm getting the wrestling side down, or at least trying
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
And then now I got to get the merchandise thing down. So look,
Yeah.
within the next year, you're definitely gonna have a lot more. Eventually, I want to do trading cards.
Cool.
So hopefully in the
Talk
future,
to
I'm gonna have a lot more.
talk to JJ. He's got a lot of merch, and he
Yeah,
knows how
that
to
guy,
do. I mean, he's got barbecue sauce and all kinds of stuff.
genius. He's a genius.
He
He
is.
really is. That guy knows how to market.
He does. Ladies and gentlemen, handsome Scott Hansen, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much. I couldn't be happier. I appreciate the opportunity greatly.
No, you're my pleasure. And folks, if you see his name on the marquee or on a social media for a pro wrestling show, go out and support these guys. They're out there busting their tails, and they're out, their shows don't cost an arm and a leg like, the big three. These are like $15, $20 to get in. Their merch is $20 to $25 for a t-shirt, and
Yep.
$5, $10 for a photo that they'll sign for you. It's not an extra 20 for the signature. They'll take a picture with you, no problem. Won't charge it an arm and a leg. So go out and support these guys. Scott, thanks one more time for coming on. I really appreciate it, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. You have a good one.
All right, folks, if you're watching, thank you. If you're listening, thank you. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so, and we will talk to you soon.